everyone. Welcome to So Zoom In. I am very excited to have a very talented young lady who's also really beautiful, part of my show today. And she has her own podcast. And I love the title. Okay, I want to make sure I get this right because it has three H's, which is kind of cool because her last name starts with an H. Horror, humor, and hunger, right?
Bingo.
All right.
Yes.
And the hunger part is fascinating because she does this whole cool thing with the recipes that we're going to get into because I definitely want to learn more about that because who doesn't love food, but to intertwine it with little humor and horror is kind of really interesting. So she has a couple of books out. She did two books in 1 year. How cool is that? And so we're going to really dive on in. So Viggy, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, your podcast. When did you start doing that?
I started doing the podcast, gosh, it must have been almost 2 years ago now. Yeah, about 2 years ago.
Did
And
you
I absolutely love doing it.
how do you decide to start it?
Well, you and I have talked about building an audience, and that was part of the reason that I wanted to start it. It was before I had published my first book, and I
Mhm.
wanted a way to connect with people and offer them something instead of just it was like about creating content like we talked about. I wanted
Right?
something out there that was creative, that was fun, and it's also a great way to network with people like you. I mean, I get to meet so many cool and interesting people through the podcast. So that was really the impetus for it, and it was also a way for me to get some short stories out there and start building an audience. And I found that I just absolutely loved it. I loved interviewing people. I love coming up with questions. I love planning a season. I just love everything about it.
Well, no, speaking of short stories, you have a couple out right now after dinner conversations, right?
Yes.
How
Yes.
did that come about?
Those were some of the first things I got published. So as I was starting to think, I want to write. That's what I want to do. I started testing the waters by doing short stories, and I got a couple published at After Dinner Conversation, which is a philosophy magazine. So they're horror, but they also have a central philosophical question that makes you think, that's open for discussion. So I started with those, and then I kept writing short stories, and they're on my Medium page and other places as well. And then I kind of, tested everything and then got ready to write the novel. And then since then, I've been writing short stories and novels, but mostly focusing on novels right now.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, you have your first novel, Much Too Vulgar, which
That's my
I'm
second one.
oh, this is your second. Oh, oh, that's right, because Alligator one was the first one. But yeah, I really love this one. I'm sorry. I haven't read the other one yet, but I really love this. Okay. So you have two novels and you are currently working on a third one.
Yes,
Right. And that is called
that is called The Rotting Room, and it's about creepy 18th century Spanish nuns. It's very different for me. It's historical fiction. I had to do a lot of research, and it's definitely the scariest thing I've ever written.
wow. You mentioned nuns to some people and they automatically get scared. So,
Some people are like,
yeah,
"Oh, yes, finally," and then other people are like, "Not going to be picking that one up."
right. Well, so in your podcast, how did you end up incorporating hunger, the whole recipe thing? How did that come about?
Well, I love cooking and I love baking. My mom actually owns a bakeware company, so I come by it honestly. And I decided I wanted to incorporate that because I love testing the limits of my creativity. And I thought, I can write this short story, I can write this novel, but can I make a recipe, kind of based on that story? And so that's just another fun way to stretch my creativity. So at the end of each season, each season is usually focused on either a short story or a novel of mine, I
Mm.
will, with my mom, usually create a recipe based on that. So for Much Too Vulgar, we actually had a cocktail called the Vulgar Alligator. It is bright green and it tastes absolutely delicious. And that was really fun and also fun to sample.
Oh, wow. All right. So what has been your favorite dish from these recipes that you've created?
For the A Cold Night for Alligators recipe is called a carnival cake. And it's a caramel cake covered in caramel corn with cookies around the outside. And it looks really pretty and it also is just absolutely delicious.
Wow. So how many recipes would you say you have now?
Oof. Probably about a dozen, something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
Do we see a book in the near future based on all your
It's
recipes?
quite possible. You never know. You never know.
All right. So have you been inspired to write a story based on a recipe?
I have actually, and this is going to sound weird, but I wrote a first draft of a book all about jelly. And I know it's going to sound weird, but I came across this Atlas Obscura article about these artists who work with jelly, and I was just absolutely fascinated by it. And I thought, I don't know, that could be kind of creepy. So I wrote a draft about a killer jello mold. And I just thought it sounded the right combination of horror, humor, and hunger, like equal measure of all of those
Right.
things.
But that does have a certain horror vibe to it, a little Roger Corman maybe,
Yeah, a little bit silly, but spooky at the same time. Yeah.
right? That there that has potential. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. So if someone wanted to get your books, they can get on Amazon or the whole online thing, right? Do you ever have like book signings where people can meet you in person to come up?
Yes. So I will actually be going to several author events this year. I have my first convention in March. It's Scares That Care Author Con. It's in Williamsburg, Virginia. And I'm also going to Horror Reader Weekend in Fredericksburg, Virginia this year, and possibly a few others. I'm still scheduling, but I am so excited to meet people and sign books and just talk to other people who love horror because most of my immediate circle they support me, but they're not big horror fans. So getting ready to meet people that love horror, I'm just so excited.
So what got you into horror? What is that excitement for you?
I've never not been interested in horror. I mean, even when I was a little kid, I would stay up late to see The Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt. I absolutely loved seeing that. And ever since then, I was reading Stephen King when I was in like the fourth grade. I've just always been attracted to it. And I think, and we've talked about this before, that kind of adrenaline rush, that cathartic release that horror gives you, and just the opportunity to do something totally outside of your comfort zone. I think that's just always attracted me to horror. I can't imagine my life without it.
That's so what do you think of like supernatural type horror versus psychological horror or like even gore horror? I mean, there's so many subsets within the genre. What's your favorite? And what do you like the most? And what do you think of the different differences?
That's a great question because I think so many people think horror is just one thing. You know, it's blood, it's gore, that's it. But you're right, there are so many different, parts of horror. And I have, I like them all. My first novel is more supernatural. Much Too Vulgar is more psychological. And then The Rotting Room, which is coming out in April, is kind of a mix of both.
Ooh,
So I like all of the subgenres of horror. I think they're all interesting and they all have their own purpose. And I like to tell people that horror is kind of like different ice cream flavors, and you just have to find the right ice cream flavor for you because some people love grief horror, some people love cosmic horror, some people love extreme horror. So there's horror for everybody. That's what I say. Horror is for everybody.
so is there a subset you don't like you would not even touch?
I haven't found one yet. No.
Oh, okay. All right. That's kind of cool. Well, how about like when you can mix them up together? Have you really d dove into like, oh, and I'm going to add some of this and add some of that and
I
really
have, and it's always fun to do that because you're always going to get a different audience with that. And I think when you can, as you're thinking about the reader experience, if you can make them feel a range of emotions, then I think you're doing something right, Not just scared. If you're scared the entire time, that can be great, but I want you to laugh a little bit, maybe be grossed out, be scared, maybe cry a little bit. Like all of those things in a horror experience, that's what I'm going for.
Oh, I love that. And and you like push your own creativity by doing that. It's like,
Mhm.
let's see how far this goes. All right, so
Yeah.
who's your favorite author of horror?
I mean, I know it sounds cliche to say Stephen King, but he's what started me on this horror path. And since then, I've gotten really involved in the indie horror community, which
Oh,
is huge and so supportive and so wonderful. And I've read a whole lot of horror this year just as I'm, getting introduced into this community. And I mean, I love Rachel Harrison. I love CJ Lead. I still love Stephen King. I don't think I'll ever not love Stephen King. So there are
I,
just so many authors out there. It's so hard to pick just one.
well, how would you feel about having your work adapted? Is that something that you would want, or do you want to keep? Yeah.
I would love to have it adapted. Sometimes when I'm just trying to fall asleep, I think about who would I cast in a movie version of this book.
Well, who
And
wouldn't cast? Okay, like let's take this for example. Okay, lots of young actresses.
mhm.
Who would be your top pick?
Problem is, I don't know a ton of the young actresses, but I do know that I think for my main character, Keely, in Much Too Vulgar, that Mia Goth would be a really good fit there.
Wow, okay. See, actors are always looking for great material. They can't act unless they have a script, right? And a lot of people think, well, I can't get my script to them. Millions of other people are. Well, they're looking for that perfect fit for them. So if you can have your idea of who you like, that's always like, you can manifest it, if you will. I was like,
Exactly. This is me putting that out into the universe right now.
right? Exactly. So say you were to have your novel adapted, would you want to be part of that process in the filmmaking process, or would you want to say, okay, here you go?
I honestly, I could see either way. I would love to be a part just so I could learn and see what's going on and see how p different people think about my work and interpret it because I put it out there, but after that, what people take from it, that's up to them. And I'm always interested to see how people take things and what they can do with it. So I think I would want to be involved, but I wouldn't want to get in the way, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Okay. All right. So to kind of like handing it over is like, okay, take good care of my child.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So you're writing Rotting Room. Great title, by the way. Do
Thank you.
you, when you're writing, do you get ideas for other subject or other books as you're writing?
Oh gosh, yes. It's actually a huge problem right now because I'm working on final edits for the Rotting Room right now, and I just had a different idea for a book that is like knocking on the door, and it's like as soon as you're done with Rotting Room, you have to write me next. So
Oh,
yes, I have a whole notebook full of ideas that I get, and the problem is just finding enough time to write all of them.
well, you are a mom too. So and that, I mean, we love our babies, without a doubt, but that is, so how do you fit that in your schedule? Because I hear this all the time. I don't have time. You know, how do you make the time to do what you feel you have to do?
I just had to be hyper efficient. So when my child is napping, one of them's at school, one of them's napping, that's when I do my work. And any other task that can be done while they're awake, then that's when I do it. So, but when you're writing, I need heads down focus time for at least an hour. So I just have had to be really efficient. And it wasn't easy. It was not an easy adjustment at all. But now that I'm used to that schedule, I can be creative in a short amount of time.
And people don't realize that you don't need to spend all day writing an
I don't
hour.
think I could at this point. I
Right.
like the short bursts of really intense work.
Okay, so what's the shortest amount of time you give yourself to write?
45 minutes probably to get into it, get something on the page, and then feel comfortable to get to a stopping point.
Oh, good. Well, so you're just allotting that time into your schedule. How do you feel if your kids read your work? Well, they're still really little right now, but say as they get older, how would that make you feel if they say, "Hey, mom, let me read."
Oh, I
Let
would love that. I would love that. I think my daughter is already showing signs of being a horror fan, and she knows the names of my books. Whenever she sees them, she says, "Oh, that's much too vulgar." So, yeah, I would totally be fine with them reading my books.
Okay, would they ever like give you ideas, or have they done anything that gives you an idea? It's like, "Oh, I could."
All the time. I mean, they're hilarious. And I actually last year I wrote a first draft of a novel that's all about fairy doors. Do you know what a fairy door is?
No, not quite.
It's kind of like it's a little door that you can paint. It's a craft and you put it on a tree and it's for kids. They're interested in it. You can get little fairies and put it around there. And it gave me an idea because I was doing that with my daughter for a horror story based on fairy doors. So I wrote that last year. It's still just a first draft, but yes, they give me ideas all the time.
Wow, that's clever. I like that. I've heard
You.
fairy rings, but the fairy that's kind of, I think I've actually seen a couple and I just thought that was cute. But fairy doors. So are your fairies like little demonic monsters or
I
in
don't want to give too much away, but yes,
okay,
that's
okay.
kind of what you could expect. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how do you feel as a writer? How do you feel about AI taking everything by storm right now?
That is something that terrifies me. I've thought about it a lot. My husband is a computer engineer, so he knows a lot more about this than me, but he tells me about a lot of what's going on in the AI world. And I tried not to let AI touch any of my work. I love the process, the creative process of coming up with an idea, knowing it's right when it just clicks. And I think if you use AI for that, you don't get that same outlet. And I mean, if you're a creative person, the whole point is bringing your creative vision to life. So just for me personally, I don't use AI, but I know it will have its uses and it's gonna come into the world whether we're ready for it or not. So it's good to think about how we can work with it in the future.
Right. I agree to always use it as a tool.
Hmm.
It. I use it. It's like when we had all these fires here in Los Angeles, I'd say, "What's the status of the fires?" It's
Yeah, it can be a great search engine, that's for sure.
right. Well, I think of it as a tool, like for historical research, like we do. Or
Yes.
how do you do your historical research? Is it in a library or is it online or?
I've done a mix for the Rotting Room, which takes place in like the 17th, 18th century. I just did a lot of reading articles on Google, just a ton of Googling. And then for other ones, I've bought books that I can read about the time period or the subject. I've talked to people if there's anybody in my life who's had a personal experience that I'm interested in kind of harvesting for my work. But it's kind of a mix of everything. And I'm always listening to people. And if anybody has a weird or creepy or horrifying experience, I'm remembering it, I'm writing it down.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, do you have a manager or an agent?
I used to. I started to go down the traditional publishing path in 2020. I had an agent, and my
Mhm.
first book, A Cold Night for Alligators, actually went on submission to publishers, but COVID hit and everything kind of went haywire. So
Right.
that stalled out, and my agent and I parted ways. We weren't really on the same creative footing anymore, and that's when I decided I'm just going to do this on my own because I don't want to wait 2 years or more to have this book on the shelves when I could do it tomorrow.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's what's great about the internet today is being able to take charge of it yourself. So you just pretty much put yourself out there, or do you have someone
Yeah.
kind of helping you with that?
I just put myself out there. And I'm very lucky that my mom used to own a PR company. So she's been very good about kind of helping me navigate the marketing world and media training and things like that. But yeah, that's what I've done this past year as I've published 2 books. I've realized I just say yes. I put myself out there. I say yes to opportunities and it's been so much fun. So much fun.
That's great. Well, okay, you're lucky to have the inside scoop on PR because someone told me marketing rules the world. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so true. It's like, how do you put yourself out there? How do you just do it? And the thing is, you are doing it. And that's exciting. And you're so young too. I love, okay, I
Oh, thank you.
know. You just really make it happen for yourself. So is this something so for your long-term career, do you always see yourself just cranking out book after book, or what do you foresee for yourself?
I would love to do that. I mean, I have so many ideas, and I know later this year my youngest child will go into school, so I will have a lot more time. And I love writing. I really do. I love getting the idea. I love the only thing I don't love is editing, but of course it's a necessary evil. But other than that, I love everything about the process and the readers and everything. So I see myself doing this forever.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you feel like the more you write, the easier it is, or do you feel depending on what the subject is all
Depending
different?
on the subject, for sure. Because I've had some books where it was like pulling teeth, and then like with Much Too Vulgar, that one just it just came out. It was kind of easy in a way, and then other ones have taken a lot more prodding.
Right. Okay. But you just keep doing it and you get through it. So would you say, okay, back to short stories. Do you get ideas for short stories that you just have to write right away, or how do you deal
I
with that?
Yeah, most of my short stories that I've written recently have been either for a magazine or for submission to an anthology or something like that, if I had a reason to do it. Because most of my ideas at this point, they want to be novels. So that's what I've been focusing on. But yeah, sometimes I will get an idea and just say, okay, this needs to happen right now. I've got the time. Let's just go ahead and do it.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. All right. So back to food, because I kind of like you're so creative, and food itself can be very, very creative, especially when you're creating new dishes. How do you ever get a recipe in mind while you're working on a story? Or does
I
it just
have. Yes, I have. And then I'll write it down and remember it for later. And I'm actually doing something right now. I joined this magazine called Dreadpot Magazine that just started for indie horror. And they have a YouTube channel. I have my own segment on it called Tag Team Tales of Terror. I love alliterations, clearly. And I challenge other horror authors to create this progressive story with me. And I pull a prompt out of a hat. We each get 30 seconds and we just start telling a story and
oh,
it's really fun. And we've aired one episode so far, and it was a success. Like it worked. And I know some people are thinking that's so scary. How can you just make a story right there? But that I think it reminds everybody that writing is meant to be fun. Storytelling is fun. And when you can just create something with somebody else, that makes it even more fun.
right? And you're building that sense of community, which is nice,
Yes.
to connect people. So
Yeah.
has it been really scary doing something like that? I mean, does the story end up scary or more funny or?
The story ended up scary. I mean, the prompt was you've been abducted by aliens, and I don't really write anything involving aliens, so that was a creative stretch for me. And it was fun. It turned out spooky and atmospheric. It had a beginning and a middle and an end. I mean, it was fun. It turned out well. And then at the end of the episode, I create a recipe for the other author based on one of their most recent books. So that's been a fun new thing that I've done. I've been reading a lot of indie horror right now because I'm preparing for these segments. And every time I'm reading, I'm thinking, okay, where can a recipe fit in here? And not every book mentions food. So sometimes you have to get extra creative with that.
The guy I write with, he always puts in food. He always has his character eating. I'm like, okay. He's, very, very thin. I'm like, you're eating a lot. You don't eat that much in real life. So I think that's kind of funny. Well, I think that's great. I could totally see you putting together a book based on just nothing but your recipes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's going to be on in part of your library. I just see it. I mean, you have to. You have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically written itself.
That's exciting. That's very exciting. Okay, so what advice would you give to any writer out there? Someone who wants to write, who hasn't, who's been dragging his or her feet, they have an idea, but they don't know how to get started. What would you say to them?
I mean, this probably sounds pretty cliche, but just start doing it. I mean, I wrote an entire novel and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. This is great. I've written the great American novel, started querying agents, and then I took a break and realized this needs extensive editing. No, this will never see the light of day. So it was a bad first draft, but it taught me so much. And I think if you don't give yourself the freedom to practice and fail, then you're never going to get past that to where you can write something really great. So I think just giving yourself permission to write something bad. It's okay. I've written several novels that I've just thrown in the trash, but because I did that, I could go on and write something much better because I learned so much from it. So that would be my main advice is just start doing it and it's going to be okay if you fail because everybody does.
Well, I think that's so great. So many people I know when they write something, because you put so much time and effort into it, you literally put your soul into it, and they can't take criticism. What advice would you give to anyone about receiving constructive criticism? Because people do have a hard time with that.
They do. I mean, I think you have to detach yourself from the work a little bit. That's why when I write something, I put it in a drawer and I let it kind of marinate for at least 6 months to the point
Oh,
where I almost don't remember what I wrote. And then when I come back, I can be more objective and it's much easier for me because I'm far away from it. And I think that emotional distance means that when somebody else reads it and they give me criticism, I can take it much better because I didn't just, put my blood, sweat, and tears into this. Like it's in the past. I am more calm. And so that's my advice for taking criticism. And I also will say I heard this from somebody else that people when they give you advice about something you've written, they might not always know how to fix it, but if they point out something, then it probably does need to be fixed. So you don't have to take their fix, but maybe re-examine it and think about how you can fix it.
oh, that's great. And again, whatever anyone else says, you don't have to take it because
No.
it's your work. So when you call your own script not great, how does that make you feel? Knowing that you put all that time and effort into it, because there has to be something great about it because you wrote it, but how do you end up saying like, oh yeah, no, what's that experience like for you?
For me, I call it a sparkle. Like if I write something and I can feel it if it's sparkly. I can feel like, okay, that dialogue is on point, the descriptions are great, the story is interesting, I'm invested, and I can tell even when I'm writing if I'm forcing myself in the wrong direction or I'm trying to be something I'm not or I haven't found my voice. And again, some of that comes with putting it away for a while and having that emotional distance. But I have found that I need that. I need that emotional distance because if I don't have the sparkle in the story, then if I don't feel it, nobody else is going to feel it. And
Right.
my mom is always reads everything I write. She's my first reader, and she's the first person to tell me if it has the sparkle or if it doesn't. And I always agree with her. Sometimes it's harder for me to agree, but I always do agree with her. She can tell immediately if it has the sparkle or if it doesn't.
Your mom's awesome.
She
I
is
have
awesome.
I have no idea, but I'm like, what a cool mom. PR, baking, food. It's like
She does it all.
that's really cool. I mean, does she live in the same area as you? Are you
She
guys?
lives right next door, actually, which is
Oh my God,
fantastic.
you are so lucky. That is
I am
definitely
so lucky.
you are
Yes.
blessed. That that is definitely a blessing. That's very cool. And does she help with the kids too?
She's watching them right now, actually.
Oh, I love her even more. She's so cool.
Yeah, she's
Hannah.
amazing.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, I'm very excited for your career because it looks like you have a very illustrious career ahead of you. I mean, you're doing it now already. You're making it happen. And that's very exciting. I I like to think of you as inspiring other young boys and girls,
Mm.
so
Thank
you're
you so much.
doing it. So is there any parting words of advice you'd like to give aspiring writers?
Hmm. I said this before, but I'll say it again because it bears repeating. If you have something in you that is creative, if you have that idea that wakes you up in the middle of the night, just start writing. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be anything, but just start writing because I've heard people say the first time you write something, that's you telling yourself the story. And then later on, you can go back and figure out the right way to tell it to other people.
Just get it out there. Yep.
Mm.
You can't rewrite something that's not written, right?
Exactly.
Someone wants to reach out to you, how can they do that?
You can do that on my website, viggyhampton.com. I'm also very active on Facebook and Instagram at Viggy Parr Hampton.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. I love Instagram. That's so
I
cool.
do too.
Yeah, I will follow you. Anyway, thank you so very much, Viggy. I look forward to talking to you again really soon. And
Me
all right,
too.
people, go out and buy this book. I love it. I love it. So anyway, we will talk very soon. Thanks,
Yeah, it
Viggy.
was so nice to talk to you.